My wife cheated with our divorce lawyer, and now she's claiming I stole $250, $0 from our joint account to hide assets. She's threatening to take everything, including the house worth over $1 million. I never thought I'd lose my family over a corrupt legal battle. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how everything in my life fell apart because of my wife's lies and betrayal. But here I am, and I'll try to lay it all out as honestly as I can. It started with little things, small signs of her being distant, secretive, and overly defensive when I'd ask about her day. At first, I brushed it off, thinking she was just stressed or maybe having an affair with her job or some guy she'd met at the gym. But the truth was way worse. It all came crashing down one Thursday afternoon. I was at work just doing my usual routine when I decided to check our joint bank account because I'd been noticing some unusual charges. Nothing big at first, an extra 100 here, a couple hundred there. I thought maybe she was spending money on gifts or something for herself, but then I saw a transfer of $50, $0. I froze. That's a lot of money, more than I'd ever seen in our account at once. My stomach sank. I immediately pulled out my laptop and logged into the bank's portal. What I saw next made my blood run cold. There was a transfer of $250, $0 from our joint account to an account I didn't recognize. My heart started pounding. I immediately called her, but she didn't pick up. I checked her recent phone activity. No calls, no texts, nothing unusual there, yet I knew something was seriously wrong. I kept staring at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. How could we lose that much money? Who took it? And most importantly, why? I decided I had to confront her in person. I waited until she came home that evening, trying to prepare myself for the worst. When she finally walked through the door, her heels clicking loudly on the floor, I could see she was acting weird, more tense than usual. She threw her purse on the table, and I just blurted out, "Where the hell did $250, $0 go?" Her face paled for a split second, then she sneered and tried to brush me off. "Oh, it's just some investment thing, don't worry about it." Her tone was dismissive, but I knew better. I wasn't born yesterday. I looked her in the eyes and said, "Don't lie to me. I know it's not an investment. I want to know what's going on now." She scoffed, crossing her arms. "You're overreacting. Maybe you're the one stealing money, huh? Ever since you started that new job, you've been paranoid about everything." That was her favorite move, blame shifting, denying, and trying to make me look crazy, but I wasn't buying it. I told her I had proof, and if she didn't come clean, I'd investigate further myself. That's when she snapped. She started yelling, calling me paranoid, controlling, and accused me of spying on her. She threw out some bullshit about trust and privacy, and then she claimed she was just stressed out about money and needed some extra cash for a trip with her friends. Yeah, right. I knew she was lying. The way she avoided my gaze, the way she kept changing the subject, it was obvious she was hiding something. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept racing. I started digging into our finances more, and that's when I found out she had been meeting with our divorce lawyer, Michael, a slick, charming guy who was supposed to be helping us sort out the house and the assets. But the more I looked, the more suspicious I became. I found emails and texts between her and Michael, full of flirtatious messages, plans to meet up, and even discussions about how to hide or protect assets. She was cheating on me with our lawyer, and she was planning to use him to screw me over in the divorce. I felt like I'd been sucker punched. My wife, the woman I loved, was not only cheating on me but was actively plotting against me with someone I trusted to help us. The betrayal cut so deep I couldn't breathe. I started questioning everything. Our entire life, our marriage, the vows I thought meant something. How could she do this? How could she lie so effortlessly? And the worst part, I realized she had been planning this for a while. I found receipts of her paying Michael extra, supposedly for consultations, but I knew better. She was buying his silence, his help in hiding her affairs and assets. By the time I confronted her again the next day, she was bitchy, dismissive, and outright lied to my face. She said she was just talking to Michael about the house and nothing inappropriate. She told me I was paranoid, that I was reading too much into things, and that I was crazy for suspecting her of cheating. But I knew the truth. I saw the messages. I knew she was lying. I could feel it in my gut. The emotional toll was brutal. I went from feeling betrayed and furious to feeling helpless and heartbroken. I loved her, or at least I thought I did. But now I saw her for what she really was: selfish, manipulative, and willing to throw everything away for some guy and a quick buck. I was devastated, but I also knew I couldn't let her get away with it. Not without consequences. Not without fighting back. That's when I started planning my revenge, but that's a story for the next part. I couldn't just sit back and let her run over me, not after what I'd found out. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got, like a volcano ready to blow. I started digging deeper into her financials, her emails, her texts, everything I could get my hands on. I needed to understand the full scope of her betrayal and, more importantly, figure out how to turn this around to my advantage. She kept insisting she was innocent, that she had no idea what I was talking about, but I wasn't buying it anymore. The evidence was stacking up against her. I found out she'd been meeting with Michael in secret, late at night, at weird little cafes, sometimes at his office. They'd talk for hours, and I got hold of some of the messages she'd sent him. It was clear she was planning something, probably to hide her assets, maybe even to frame me for something. I felt like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. One night, I decided I had to confront her again, this time with everything I'd uncovered. I waited until she was out of the house, then I went through her phone and her laptop. I found emails where she was discussing how to transfer money out of our joint account without raising suspicion, fake invoices, fake receipts, even instructions from Michael on how to clean the accounts. She'd been planning this for months. All I could think was, how much does she really love me? Or was I just some fool she was using? When she got home the next evening, I was ready. I told her I knew everything, about her affair with Michael, about the money, about the lies. Her face twisted into that nasty sneer she always used when she thought she had the upper hand. She started yelling, calling me all sorts of names: paranoid, crazy, controlling. She said I was accusing her of things she didn't do, and that I was jealous and possessive. Yeah, right. The only thing I was possessive of was the truth, and she was trying to hide it all behind her bitchy attitude. I asked her outright, "Did you take the $250, $0? Did you plan this with Michael? Are you trying to screw me out of our house?" And she just looked at me, eyes full of contempt, and said, "You're crazy. You're just jealous because I'm finally happy. Maybe if you weren't so insecure, you'd see I'm the one who's been loyal all along." That was her favorite line: blame shift, deny, make herself the victim. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I knew she was lying, and I knew she was cheating. Over the next few days, I kept collecting evidence. I hired a private investigator to follow her, just to confirm what I already suspected. Sure enough, he came back with photos of her meeting Michael at some fancy hotel downtown. They were kissing, holding hands, the whole 9 yards. It wasn't just emotional cheating, it was full-on physical. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut all over again. How could she do this? How could she betray me, our marriage, everything we built, for some lawyer she barely knew? But here's the kicker: while all this was going on, she was also trying to turn the tables on me legally. She claimed I'd stolen $250, $0 from our joint account, trying to paint me as some kind of criminal. She threatened to file for divorce, to take everything: our house, our savings, everything. She even went as far as hiring a lawyer herself, Michael's partner, I later found out. She was preparing to fight dirty, and I knew I had to do the same. I started documenting everything: screenshots of emails, bank statements, her texts, everything. I also made sure I had a backup of all my financial records, just in case she tried to plant something on me. I realized I was in a war now, and I had to fight smart. I couldn't let her destroy me financially or emotionally. I had to hit back hard but carefully. One night, I sat down and drafted a plan. I knew she was planning to accuse me of stealing money, so I wanted to turn that around. I decided I'd go to a forensic accountant, get a detailed report of our finances, and prepare to prove that she had been embezzling or hiding assets. I also contacted a lawyer I trusted, someone who specialized in divorce and financial disputes. I wanted to be ready for whatever she threw at me. In the meantime, I decided to confront her one last time, face to face. I told her I knew about her affair with Michael, about the money she took, and about her plans to screw me over. I told her I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I warned her that I had all the evidence, and if she tried to take everything we had, I'd fight her in court and expose her lies. That was the moment she finally looked nervous, like she realized I was serious. This whole thing has been a whirlwind of betrayal, anger, pain, and now cold calculation. I never thought I'd be in this position, married, trusting my wife, only to find out she'd been lying and cheating the entire time. It's like watching my whole life burn to the ground. But I also know I can't let her win. I have to fight for what's mine, for my dignity, and for whatever shred of honesty I can still salvage. The next step is to wait and see how she reacts, but I know one thing for sure: this isn't over yet. After I gathered all the evidence and made my plans, I realized I couldn't just sit around waiting for her next move. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became she was dangerous. Not just because she was cheating, but because she was willing to lie, manipulate, and even threaten to destroy everything I loved just to get her way. I had to act. Fast but carefully. I hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her just to make sure I was one step ahead. The guy was good, followed her around, snapped photos of her sneaking out with Michael, her trips to that fancy hotel downtown. I got the proof I needed that she was cheating physically, not just emotionally. It hurt like hell to see those pictures, but I knew I had to stay rational. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. It was about protecting myself and my assets. Meanwhile, I started talking to a lawyer I'd found through a friend, someone who specialized in divorce and asset protection. I explained everything: the secret meetings, the money transfers, the texts, and the threats. I needed to get ahead of her to make sure I wasn't the one getting. She was already trying to spin the story that I was a thief, that I'd stolen the money, and that I was some paranoid lunatic. I had to prove her wrong, and I had to do it fast. One thing I learned during this whole mess is that women like her, bitchy, manipulative, and willing to lie, will do anything to save their own skin. She kept insisting she was the victim, that I was crazy for accusing her. She threw around words like trust, loyalty, and family, but I saw through her bullshit. She was just trying to distract me, to turn the tables. She even accused me of cheating, which was laughable because I'd been faithful, but I knew she was trying to make me look guilty of her own dirt. I decided I had to confront her again, but this time with all my evidence laid out. I told her I knew she'd been meeting with Michael, that I had proof of her affair, and that I wasn't going to let her use her lawyer to screw me over. I warned her that if she tried to take the house, the savings, or any other assets, I'd fight her all the way to court. I told her I was prepared to expose her lies and her cheating publicly if I had to. That seemed to shake her up a bit, but she still had her bitchy attitude, trying to act like I was the crazy one. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my head: the lies, the betrayal, the money stolen right out from under me. It felt like my whole life was collapsing around me. I couldn't believe I'd trusted her so much. I'd always thought we were solid, that we had a future together. But now I saw her for what she really was: a manipulative bitch who was willing to ruin everything for a quick payoff. I also started thinking about the house, our biggest asset. It's worth over $1 million, and she was threatening to take that too. I knew I had to do something about it. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in property disputes and asset protection. I wanted to make sure I could keep the house if it came down to a legal fight. I also started gathering more documents: mortgage papers, property records, anything that proved I was the rightful owner. Over the next few days, I worked on my legal strategy. I wanted to get a court order to freeze her assets if necessary, to prevent her from transferring or hiding any more money. I also looked into the possibility of a forensic audit of our accounts. I knew she'd try to lie her way out of this, but I was determined to expose everything. I wasn't going to let her walk away with our house or our savings just because she was a bitchy, manipulative liar. Meanwhile, she kept up her act, pretending to be innocent, crying crocodile tears and accusing me of everything under the sun. She even tried to turn our friends and family against me, saying I was abusive, controlling, and unstable. It was classic gaslighting, but I knew better. I knew the truth. She was the one cheating, lying, stealing, and scheming behind my back. One day, I decided I had to make a move. I filed for a court injunction to freeze her accounts and prevent her from transferring assets. I also served her with legal papers demanding full disclosure of her financials. I knew she'd fight back, but I was ready. I wanted to show her I wasn't going to be pushed around. I also told her lawyer I had all the evidence, and if she tried to lie or hide anything, I'd use it against her in court. That's when the real chaos started. She responded with a barrage of threats, saying she'd take me for everything, that I'd never see the house again, that she'd ruin me financially. She called me a loser, a paranoid freak, and a controlling bastard. But I didn't care anymore. I'd made my decision. I was going to fight for my rights, for my money, and for what was left of my dignity. No matter how bitchy she got or how much she lied, I knew the truth and I was going to expose her. I had to. The legal battle kicked into high gear faster than I expected. I had all my evidence prepared: bank statements, emails, texts, photos from the investigator, and I handed everything over to my lawyer. We filed for a court order to freeze her accounts because I knew she was scheming to transfer money somewhere else or hide assets. I wasn't about to let her walk away with the house or the cash she'd stolen. She responded with the usual barrage of threats, calling me every name in the book: loser, paranoid freak, controlling asshole, but I refused to back down. Her bitchy attitude only fueled my resolve. I knew she'd try to spin this as me being unhinged, but I had the proof and I was prepared to fight her in court. I also hired a forensic accountant to dig into our financial records, just to make sure there were no surprises hiding somewhere. She started making moves to dig herself out of the hole she was in. First, she tried to gaslight me, claiming she was just talking to Michael about the house, that I was crazy to think she was cheating. Then she threw a tantrum in front of our friends, crying and yelling that I was abusive and paranoid, trying to turn everyone against me. But I knew her game. I kept my composure, knowing that her lies wouldn't hold up in court. One night she stormed into my house unexpectedly, screaming about how I was trying to ruin her life and how she'd take everything from me. She yelled that I was jealous of her happiness with Michael, that I was controlling and possessive. I just looked at her, calm but firm, and told her that I had all the evidence she'd been trying to hide, and that I was prepared to expose her lies publicly if she kept going down this path. I told her I was going to fight for every penny, every asset, and for the house. If she wanted a war, I was ready. The next day, I went to court and filed for a temporary restraining order. I wanted to prevent her from transferring any more money or hiding assets. I also requested a full disclosure of her finances. It was a tense hearing, but I knew I had the upper hand. My lawyer presented all the evidence I'd collected, and the judge granted the order to freeze her accounts temporarily. That was a huge win, but I knew it wasn't over yet. Meanwhile, she kept trying to manipulate the situation. She hired her own lawyer, Michael's partner, and started fighting back with her own legal filings. She claimed I was harassing her, that I was trying to control her, and even accused me of stalking her. I just shook my head. I knew this was her desperation kicking in. She was trying to create a narrative to cover her tracks, but I had the truth on my side. Things got even more intense when I received a call from the forensic accountant. He'd found irregularities in our account statements, large sums of money that had been transferred out just before I discovered the theft. It was clear she'd been moving money around, trying to hide her tracks. I shared this info with my lawyer, and we prepared for a full audit of our finances. I knew she'd fight tooth and nail, but I was ready. In the meantime, I also started documenting her behavior, her lies, her outbursts, her manipulation tactics. I wanted to have a solid case, not just financially, but emotionally and psychologically too. I realized I was dealing with someone who would do anything to win, even if it meant destroying everything I cared about. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. Every time I thought I'd seen the worst, she'd come back with some new stunt. Another threat, another lie, another attempt to manipulate the system. I kept reminding myself that I had the truth, and I wasn't going down without a fight. I also started leaning on close friends and family, telling them everything, so I wouldn't feel so alone in this mess. One night, I sat on my porch, staring at the house I'd poured my life into, thinking about how it could all be gone if she managed to take everything. I made a promise to myself then. I was going to do whatever it took to keep what was mine. I'd fight her in court, expose her lies, and make sure she paid for the betrayal. I knew she was trying to paint me as the bad guy, but I was determined to be the one who came out on top. It was war now, and I was ready to win. The legal fight dragged on, and every day felt like a new battlefield. She continued her efforts to twist the narrative, sending nasty texts claiming I was crazy, violent, and trying to ruin her life. Meanwhile, I stayed focused, collecting more evidence and working closely with my lawyer to build a case that would hold up in court. I knew she'd try to spin this as a simple breakup, but I had receipts, proof of her affair, the money she stole, the lies she told. One morning, I received a call from my lawyer. He told me that the forensic accountant had uncovered more disturbing details. She transferred hundreds of thousands of dollars out of our joint account into offshore accounts and fake companies. She was actively trying to hide her assets. That was the moment I realized she wasn't just cheating on me, she was scheming to wipe me out financially. I felt a mix of rage and despair. How did it come to this? I knew I had to act fast. I authorized a full forensic audit of all our accounts, and I pushed to get a court order to seize any assets she was hiding. I also filed for full disclosure of her financials, bank statements, tax returns, anything that could reveal her secret dealings. It was a brutal process, but I was determined. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. She responded by escalating her threats. She accused me of stalking, harassment, and trying to control her, and she hired her own lawyer who was more than happy to fight dirty. She even filed for a protective order claiming I was violent and unstable. It was classic manipulation, trying to make me look like the villain. I knew her game and I refused to play along. One day she showed up unexpectedly at my house, yelling and crying, trying to guilt me into dropping the case. She said she loved me, that she was sorry, and that everything was a mistake, but I wasn't buying it. I told her that her actions proved otherwise. She'd been cheating, stealing, and lying. I told her I fight for my rights and that I'd expose her lies in court. I saw her face twist with anger and frustration, but I stood my ground. Meanwhile, I kept building my case. I had the forensic reports, the bank records, the investigators' photos, and the emails. I had everything I needed to prove that she'd been lying and stealing. I also made arrangements to have the house appraised again, just to make sure I knew its true value. I wasn't going to let her take the house, especially after all I'd invested in it. The legal process was exhausting. Every hearing, every court date felt like another step closer to justice, or so I hoped. She kept trying to delay things, filing motions and accusations, but I stayed persistent. I knew I had the truth on my side, and I was determined to fight for what was rightfully mine. I also started seeing a therapist, needed someone to help me process all this chaos because, honestly, I was falling apart inside. Then, just when I thought I'd hit a wall, my lawyer told me about a potential settlement. She was willing to negotiate, probably because she saw her lies and her schemes were about to blow up in her face. I was hesitant at first. I didn't want to give her anything, but I realized that a settlement might be the best way to get her out of my life without dragging it through a long, messy trial. I agreed to meet and negotiate, but only on strict terms. She'd pay back every dollar she stole, and she'd agree to give up any claim to the house. That day, I sat across from her lawyer, feeling a strange mixture of relief and anger. I knew she was trying to buy her way out of this mess, but I wasn't about to let her walk away scot-free. I laid out my terms clearly: full repayment, full disclosure, and a legal agreement that she'd never come after me again. After some tense back and forth, she finally agreed, probably because she knew her lies were about to be exposed, and she didn't want to face a court trial. When the deal was sealed, I felt a massive weight lift off my shoulders. I knew I'd won, at least for now. She paid back the stolen money and I kept the house. but the scars of betrayal would stay with me for a long time. I learned that some people, no matter how much you love them, can turn out to be rotten inside. That trust, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild. But I also learned that I had strength I didn't know I possessed. That even in the darkest moments, you can find a way to fight back and come out stronger. Now I'm trying to move on, rebuild what I can, and learn to trust again, carefully. One thing's clear. Never ignore the signs of a bitchy, manipulative partner who's willing to lie, cheat, and steal just to get what she wants. I hope my story serves as a warning. If you're going through something similar, stay vigilant, keep evidence, and don't be afraid to stand your ground. Because if you don't, you might lose everything. Your money, your house, your dignity, and maybe even your sanity. Looking back now, I realize how close I came to losing everything. My marriage, my money, my sanity. The whole ordeal was a brutal wake-up call about trust, betrayal, and the lengths some people will go to for greed and selfishness. I thought I knew my wife, the woman I married, but I found out she was capable of lying, cheating, and scheming on a scale I never imagined. It's like uncovering a different person entirely, someone I almost didn't recognize. The hardest part was the emotional toll. There were nights I'd lie awake, replaying every moment, her sneering dismissals, the fake tears, the lies about trust and loyalty. I felt humiliated, angry, and devastated, not just because she cheated, but because she played me for a fool. I'd always been the guy who believed in honesty, hard work, and loyalty. And to see her throw all that away for some lawyer and a quick payoff, it broke something inside me. But I also learned resilience. I learned that even when everything seems to be falling apart, you can find a way to stand tall. I learned to be cautious about who I trust, to keep records, and to fight for what's right. I learned that sometimes, the only way to survive a betrayal of that magnitude is to be relentless, gather evidence, seek legal help, and never give up. I realized that I don't need someone who lies and manipulates to be happy. I can rebuild, I can move forward, and I can learn from this nightmare. Most importantly, I've come to see that revenge isn't about hurting her back, though I'll admit, it felt good to see her squirm when her lies unraveled. Revenge is about reclaiming your life, your dignity, and your peace of mind. It's about making sure she doesn't get away with destroying what we built. I've come out of this wiser, more cautious, and more determined to protect myself. Now I focus on healing. I've started therapy, working through the anger and betrayal. I'm slowly rebuilding my confidence, learning to trust again, but this time with more caution. I've realized that not everyone is who they seem, and that sometimes the biggest lesson is about knowing your worth. I refuse to let her define me or my future. To anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, I'll say this: trust your gut. Keep records. Don't be afraid to fight for what's yours. And don't let anyone, no matter how charming or loving they seem, destroy your life over greed, lies, or betrayal. Stand your ground, gather your evidence, and fight for your peace. Because in the end, the truth will come out and you'll come out stronger.